So you're in the market for a fancy new cruiser and the Rebel 1100 caught your eye. You might want to rethink it because the Rebel 1100 is anything but a real cruiser.
Perfect.
Welcome back to Life of Birch. This is Birch, and there's been a lot of debates as to whether or not the Rebel 1100 is quote-unquote a real cruiser. Well, after 10 months of owning this bike, I am here to definitively say it is not a real cruiser. I'll explain. Alright, now before we get into that, make sure to go ahead and subscribe if this is your first time finding the channel, because obviously you have interest in the Rebel 1100, and I have tons of content with mine already and tons more to come, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. And if nothing else, go ahead and subscribe because I'm out here in 40-degree weather with snow and salt on the roads doing this for you guys. Alright, now let's talk about what I mean when I say that the Rebel 1100 is not a real cruiser. And when I say not a real cruiser, I just mean it's not your typical cruiser. So if you're looking for a bike that has your kind of classic cruiser feel to it, the Rebel 1100 might not be right for you because it's anything but a typical cruiser. Now when you think about a typical cruiser, what do you think of? I think of a bike that's, you know, a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, not exactly the most agile thing ever, but it's okay because you're not really getting it to putt around town on. You're getting it for your longer trips where you can be a little bit more comfy. And when you think cruiser, you think like bare bones classic look to it, not a whole lot of frills or technology behind it. Really all that matters is it has that badass Vtwin sound, that nice Harley rumble to it. And if you want more storage, you can even throw some big saddlebags on there and you can go cross country and have everything that you need right there with you. And really it's as close as you can get to driving a car while still being on a motorcycle. Now I don't know about you, but that's what I picture when I hear cruiser. Lots of people see that this bike is a cruiser and they expect kind of that same feel to it. And I'm here to tell you after 10 months of owning this thing that that is not at all what you should expect out of it. What I've found is that even though this bike looks like a cruiser, it shares more characteristics with a naked bike than with a cruiser, I think. And honestly, that's why I love it. Alright, now what do I mean by that? Let's kind of take a look at some of the characteristics of what a real cruiser is that I just mentioned and then compare it to the Rebel and compare it to kind of, you know, your traditional naked bike. So when you're talking about a cruiser and your V-twin sound, you are not going to get that with this bike because it's not a V-twin, it's a parallel twin. And while it sounds badass, it sounds nothing like your typical V-twin cruiser Harley kind of deal. See what I mean? Personally, I'm totally cool with that because I'm not a big fan of like the typical Harley sound in the first place. I love the way that this bike sounds, especially with the Two Brothers exhaust I have on there. It sounds so good. But you can hear how this parallel twin engine almost sounds more similar to like my FC07 than it does to a Harley. Which makes sense because they're both parallel twins as opposed to the big beefy V-twin that the Harley has. And not only does it sound similar to something like the FC07, but I feel like it performs a lot closer to something like an FC07 or like a punchy naked bike than it does to like a big, beefy, smoother cruiser, if that makes sense. Most cruisers have that torque down low, but it's not like punchy torque. At least the cruisers that I've ridden, it's more of like a, I don't want to say a slow torque, but it'll pull you back, but it's not like jerky and punchy. Whereas the Rebel 1100 has torque down low, but I describe it more as like a punchy kind of torque, you know what I mean? I don't know if you'll be able to tell how like kind of jerky and punchy that was because of the GoPro stabilization, but even in standard mode it's that punchy. And when you're talking about the punchiness and the throttle response and stuff like that, it kind of leads into all of the technology that this bike has. Whereas like I said, traditional cruisers, you just kind of think bare bones, not a lot of technology, just kind of traditional. This bike has your rider modes where you can pick rain mode, standard mode, sport mode, user mode. It has built-in ABS, built-in cruise control. All of this is standard. They're not even options you have to add. And that's just something that up until now you wouldn't really expect out of the cruiser category, but you would expect out of something like a sport bike or a naked bike. I think I got through that light in time. Now another place where I think this bike really draws on like the naked bike characteristics as opposed to the cruiser characteristics is the handling and just how agile this thing is. When you think cruiser, typically you think a big heavy cruiser that's not really agile around town, not really the best for canyon carving and back roads and stuff like that, but you're not really looking for that. You're looking for, you know, it to be nice and stable on the highway, so you'll take that weight and kind of the oafiness over the agility any day. But this this bike weighs in at only 485 pounds ready to ride, whereas most of your traditional cruisers are going to be 600 plus pounds. And those weight savings combined with kind of the geometry of the bike really translate into a bike that's a lot easier to ride when you're talking about going through a neighborhood like this, or going through downtown to grab coffee, or, you know, hitting the back roads. Oh, I'm at a dead end. I got no idea where I am. Yo, check out that freaking car. That thing is sick. Oh my gosh. Alright, so like I was saying, this bike is just so light and agile and fun to throw around turns that it just does not feel like a cruiser. At least all of the cruisers that I've ridden have been a lot heavier and just feels like, I don't know, like a big boat, like a muscle car that you're throwing around turns. Whereas the Rebel 1100, I mean, I don't want to do this too much because the roads are all salty and cold, but it's just so agile and so light feeling, and throwing it around like that is just honestly effortless. And that's just something that I don't come to expect out of cruisers. Now, obviously there's bikes like, you know, everyone keeps telling me to try the Scout Bobber and all those kinds of bikes that are kind of in line with the Rebel as far as like light and flickable and fun. But when you're thinking traditional cruiser, you don't get that out of the cruiser category. Now, with that said, because you kind of get all those perks based on the geometry and how light the bike is, obviously there are trade-offs to be made. With how light this bike is and the nice flickable geometry, it does kind of have some downsides as far as, you know, your traditional highway riding. Now, can the Rebel 1100 do longer highway trips? Absolutely. But will it do it as well as like your big Harleys and traditional cruisers? Definitely not. And if you're looking for something that will do long highway trips and be super comfy in the process, this might not be the bike for you. This bike just feels a lot smaller than your bigger cruisers, and you get that 35-degree lean angle out of it, but it's because the foot pegs are a little bit higher and your position is a little bit more tucked in, similar to a naked bike, as opposed to, you know, stretched out like your typical cruiser. So if you're shopping for a cruiser and you're looking to tour the United States on it or whatever, this might not be the bike for you because it's just not built with the same characteristics of a typical cruiser. But if you're looking for a bike that has the comfort of a cruiser but has the fun of a naked bike and the punchiness and the response and all the technology of, you know, not necessarily a cruiser, then this might be the bike for you. I've already seen a handful of people that have bought this bike and then gone on to sell it only a couple months later, and when somebody asks why they're selling it, they say, oh, well, you know, it's just not really doing what I want it to do. And I think lots of that just comes down to misinformation as far as what this bike is meant to do. It can do pretty much anything. I feel like this is a great jack-of-all-trades bike, but if you're looking for traditional cruiser capabilities where you're hopping on it and you're going on the highway and you have your radio up here and you have your big windscreen and you're all nice and comfy, then you're probably not going to love this bike. But if you're looking for something that looks like a cruiser, has the cruiser styling, the cruiser comfort, but it's more geared towards back roads and canyon cruising, and it's nice and nimble and agile and just tons of fun, and you can throw it around without even thinking about it, then this is probably the bike for you. I think the issue is that lots of people see that it's a cruiser and they think traditional cruiser. When I ride this bike, I think a punchy, fun, naked bike disguised as a cruiser. And that is what I mean by this bike not being a quote-unquote real cruiser. Obviously it's a cruiser, but it doesn't act like one at all. Alright, how about pulling up right here for the end shot? I feel like that was perfect timing. So there it is, my thoughts and opinions on the Rebel 1100 and how it's not a quote-unquote real cruiser, because it doesn't really act like a cruiser. It acts more like a fun, punchy, agile, naked bike disguised as a cruiser, but that is why I love this bike. And like I said, these are my thoughts and opinions. They are not facts. If you're thinking about getting one, watch all the videos you can, kind of pick up on everybody's different interpretation of the bike. Everybody gets it for a different reason. Everybody views it a different way. So the best thing that you can do is just watch as many videos as you can, read as many articles as you can, and get as informed as you can before buying it and potentially making a mistake if you're looking for a quote-unquote traditional real cruiser. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel in a bigger and better way, check out the Patreon, link in the description, patreon.com/lifeofbirch. You can pledge your monthly amount and it'll help the channel in ways that you cannot even imagine, and in return you get exclusive content, early access to videos, and more. But I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go finish enjoying my nice chilly ride. As we're signing off, make sure to check out my other videos right here that YouTube is recommending, thinking that you'll like. And of course, once again, if it's your first time finding the channel, go ahead and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content. Love you guys. Peace.